welcome to live interview, Radio Cine. We are in Toronto, in spite of the Spanish flag behind me. That's it, and we are talking with an American guy in Paris, who is our favorite guy in Paris. He's Dennis Broe. Dennis, how are you?
I'm good. I'm coming to you from war-torn Europe,
Yes, I'm
and
surprised. I'm surprised you're not writing because you're you're writing the whole time. You don't stop writing ever. So congratulations anyway, because we have your third Harry Palmer novel. Harry Palmer, remember, not Harry Potter. Nothing to do with Harry Potter. Harry Palmer, very interesting guy from the 1940s. And now you have completed the trilogy. It's a trilogy about corruption. What is the name of the whole trilogy?
yeah, the trilogy is called Calamitous Corruption, and
Calamitous.
it's now
Right.
finished all three books, and it's about L.A. in the late '40s, which is a kind of Babylon Berlin, where
Yeah.
corruption reigns supreme, and where a lot of problems the country faces today were set in place.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a new film called Babylon about the silent era in
Yeah.
Hollywood, but I think this sort of era that I'm talking about certainly matches it for corruption.
Mm-hmm.
The trilogy depicts the period immediately after World War II and takes place over the years 1947 to 49 and
Mm-hmm.
ends on the edge of the new decade, 1950. And I
Mm-hmm.
do have to say, a friend of mine said, "Gee, it's too bad you don't write about the present." Well,
Oh, but
I've
you
been
write about the present. It's things
Yes,
that
I've
are
been reading
happening
this to
now.
my reading group, and
Yeah.
all of them say this is exactly the present you're talking about. Things have
Yeah.
not changed, and that's really too bad. But in a way, I am writing about the present. So the first book is about the onset of the blacklist and the intrusion of money into
I
the
remember.
entertainment world, which is really
Yeah.
rearing its head today as AT&T was forced to divest
Sure.
itself of Warner's because, as usual, they tried to simply make money, and that's not how the industry works. And they had to learn that truth once again. The second book is about the buildup of the arms industry in a time of peace. And of course,
Mhm.
that's with us today as the military budget in the US is greater than all other expenses combined, and the country's on the brink of nuclear war,
Mhm.
such that Business Insider recently ran an article noting the four places where nuclear war could break out. And the
Mhm.
third and new book is called Precinct with the Golden Arm, and it's about the LAPD and its relations with the Mexican American community in LA, and particularly in Boyle Heights in East LA, which is now sort of the new Brooklyn and being colonized as prices are going up very fast. But the
Yeah.
book also deals with gangs in this neighborhood, especially in the wake of the Zoot Suit Rebellion. And I don't call it a riot, I call it a rebellion,
Yeah.
because the riot really was prompted by American servicemen, not by the Zoot Suiters themselves.
Sure.
And it also talks about the coming of heroin to these neighborhoods and the rise of big pharma after the war. And our
Yeah.
detective, Harry Palmer, encounters all of these in the book.
There's a quote in your book, which I'm going to put on screen at the beginning, which sets the tone for the book. I think it's a good police force is one
Yes.
that catches more crooks than it employs. Robert Marsh,
Yes.
Commissioner of the London Police. This is a real quote.
Yes. It is a real quote.
It's
It's quite
amazing.
surprising, isn't it?
Yeah,
And it
because
actually,
as I know you, it's also your thoughts, so
yes.
isn't it?
Yes, it does really characterize the book, and it is
Yeah.
true. Robert Marks, who was the head of the London Police, and before that was in
Oh my.
IA, Internal Affairs,
Yeah.
did say that actually. Yes. So my book is about a police department where they maybe don't catch more crooks than they employ. Maybe they employ more crooks.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, that is for sure. That is a true quote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely.
So this is a moment in the LAPD when the department is changing or supposedly
Hmm.
changing. 1949. It's on the
Mhm.
brink of next year selecting William Parker as chief, and Parker has a reputation for not abiding corruption, which the
Mhm. Yeah.
department is at that time notorious for. In 49, they have this Marine serving as interim chief, but that's because the last chief was heavily implicated in a scandal
Mhm.
involving a favorite officer of his and a madam in a high-priced house of ill repute. So
Mhm.
that's where the LAPD is kind of coming from, and they're trying to clean up their act supposedly, and that's what Harry's. That's what they're telling Harry. That's what everyone's telling him. In looking at the imminent arrival of Parker in
Mhm.
1950. So
Completely.
things are changing, Harry's told. But for those in Boyle Heights, maybe not so much.
Mhm.
And the story begins that's primarily at this point now starting to be a primarily Mexican American population and
Yeah.
Mexican American and Latin American population. So the story begins with Teresa, a young girl who wants to be a star
Mhm.
of the Mexican then American cinema like her heroine Dolores Del Rio. And she's
Mhm.
been taken, and Harry is then approached by her mother, whose name Esperanza means hope, and who says
Mhm.
her daughter has been kidnapped. And
Mhm.
Harry says, "Do you have any idea where she is?" And she says, "Yes, she's at the Hollenbeck police station." And Harry says, "Oh, that kind of kidnapping." And he
Mhm.
immediately signs off on the case when he finds out the
Mhm.
arresting officer is one Bulldog Higgins, who he,
Mhm.
along with his partner Case, has had past dealings with, which we gather have not turned out well. But he
Mhm.
is attracted to Esperanza, and against his better judgment, he takes the case.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that's
it's like your Harry Palmer books that you have a structure, but you always surprise us with the use of words, with the character itself. Dennis, your subjects, as we've talked, they are usually very current, very they touch us contemporarily. Uh, do you did you choose them before writing the books, or have you changed along the way? Because uh, police corruption, well, I don't know if it's an eternal matter, but it's very contemporary. Also, big pharma, it's very up to date. How do you choose the themes, or Harry Palmer whispers them to you? How do you do it?
well, the Black Lives Matter movement really
Yeah,
have a lot to do with choosing the police corruption because it really came to the fore, and was a major
absolutely.
issue.
Hmm.
And it did shed light on the LAPD also, which is always
Hmm.
doesn't have really good relations with Mexican American and
Yeah,
Black and African American
yeah.
communities. So that became a real subject for research. And then, yeah, I
Hmm.
did like mixing. There's this sort of thing. I like to look at the various industries,
Hmm.
and this one I'm looking at. This has a lot to do with this company Omerta, which is a rising drug company, which has come out of the
Hmm.
war as one of the winners. As over 400 companies were paired to the 12 who were best
Wow.
able to manufacture penicillin.
Hmm.
So Harry first sees the
Yeah.
owner, Dr. Clyde Stevens, who he encounters outside the police station, proclaiming the
Hmm.
uses of the drug to cure syphilis. And
Yeah.
Harry later encounters him because Dr. Stevens seems to be at work trying to help addicts in the neighborhood recover from a deadly strain of heroin being
Yeah.
unleashed on the populace. And so Harry's out looking for this strain. And, so he goes to see Stevens. But this is a moment in the rise of Big Pharma. And really, it's a moment in the consolidation of Big Pharma.
Hmm.
That's what it is.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so there's that. Meanwhile, this book features much more. Also, his partner, the former club girl Crystal,
Sure.
and she's
Yeah.
obsessed with trying to find her former roommate Jade, and she cannot figure out where she's disappeared to. But she
Hmm.
knows that in Hollywood after the war, the prognosis for young women who do
Yeah.
not make it in the movie business is not good. So she
Hmm.
starts out on this sort of epic search for Crystal. Um, in terms of the LAPD, Harry
Yeah.
tangles with Higgins and Case, who were both involved in a case of corruption in the station at Figueroa, one of the rougher parts of the city, and still one of the rougher parts of the city, and have now been transferred to Boyle Heights, where they claim to have cleaned up their act. He also encounters two Mexican American cops, and the four are soon appointed to the Gang Squad, which is an invention of Parker's, which would supposedly tackle organized crime, which in
Mhm.
Boyle Heights get used in different ways. Along
Mhm.
with this, also there's the city coroner, Phineas Poole, who
Yeah.
drips corruption from every pore, wiping blood from a corpse off his cigar to continue smoking,
Mhm.
and who works in league with the department to uncover the truths that it wants him to uncover. You know, so there's all of this. There's also the Ku Klux Klan. They show up
Yeah.
because Harry tracks Higgins to a meeting of the Ku Klux Klan,
Mhm.
and they proudly proclaim that they are the new Klan. That there's no more hoods and burning
Mhm.
crosses. Now they work with the banks and getting them to refuse loans to anyone trying to leave Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, and building
Mhm.
highways that will crisscross the area and break up the neighborhoods. And if you ever go to Boyle Heights, the first thing that you see that
Yeah.
totally strikes you is that you can't walk more than 4 or 5 blocks without having an overpass and a highway passing through. Uh,
Mhm.
in New York, where I lived before Paris, we had this with the
Yeah.
Bronx, where
Yeah.
the Cross Bronx Expressway was a way of people coming from the suburbs avoiding the Bronx. But the
Mhm.
same thing has happened is beginning to happen at this moment in LA with the Santa Ana Freeway, and then there's going to be
Yeah.
many more, And
Absolutely.
so the Klan here, they they've modernized.
Mhm.
They first of all they've been outlawed.
Mhm.
However, none of them have ever been arrested. So it's
Mhm.
not much of an outlawing, but they're no more hoods and burning crosses, and now they're
Mhm.
cleaning up their act, and they're working they're working with the with the establishment,
Mhm.
and that's working out pretty well for them, actually.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's another thing, and Higgins is there, the cop,
Yeah.
supposedly spying on the Klan as a sort of as a spy, and and Harry follows him there and almost gets caught, and that's a kind of suspenseful moment in the book, and then
Yeah.
goes to confront Higgins to ask him what he's doing. But that will and that and that's one of the mysteries. So yeah.
Yeah, this is all as usually very well crafted, intertwined with your style, with the witty like sentences. Harry Palmer with the careful language Harry uses, and well, this peculiar humor you have. But there's also, as you said, social critique, and well, for me, it's been shocking. Several sentences I've written down, but we won't have time to talk about everything. But in one time, there's this sentence: "We've ridden the penicillin craze about as far as it will go, and now there is a demand for more and newer drugs. We've done a lot of good in that area, but the new frontier is pain, drugs that remove all kinds of pain." This happened because there's been the opioid crisis with sentences, and well, this all started in this time, as you said, in late 40s, and it's up to now. It's going to improve. Do you see at the big pharma? It's getting bigger and bigger, and there's no way to avoid it. How do you see it?
I think they've really been helped by COVID,
Sure,
and um,
sure, sure.
and that's helped them consolidate and become bigger. And no one's benefited more from the misery of COVID than big pharma.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so there's that. But then, of course, there's also the opioid crisis. Now in this time, it's heroin, which is just starting to infiltrate these neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Um, and there's this whole question in the novel about what is a gang and what are these Mexican gangs? Are
Yeah.
they, as the press claims, the LA Times, which at that point the LA
Mhm.
Times was really a rag and it was just
Yeah.
a racist rag. That's what it was.
Mhm.
Now, that's not the LA Times today. The LA Times
Mhm.
today is a good sort of muckraking newspaper that does a lot of interesting work, but that's
Mhm.
not what it was at that point.
Mhm.
So you have them sort of firing up and firing up these sort of racist diatribes against people in the neighborhood who are really just
Mhm.
kids coming together to try to protect themselves. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the way the book sort of sees the gangs. But violence is coming with the heroin, and that's a part of it. The other thing that the book points out, I don't want to give too much away, is that
Mhm.
almost every addictive drug that's on the street today did not come from the street, but came from a big pharma lab,
Yeah.
including fentanyl, the one that's killing the current drug that's now killing people. So these were
Mhm.
drugs that were discovered in the lab and then made their way out to the streets. But it's
That's
very, very
terrible.
interesting
Yeah.
that that is the source of these drugs. And yes, and they're about this whole thing of like moving from penicillin, which has a limited use, which sort of
Mhm.
uh, helps take care of infection, to pain. And when you move to pain, you're
Mhm.
also sort of establishing what pain is, and you're trying to
Yeah.
dictate what it is, so that so you can discover a drug that will cure it.
Mhm.
So and there's also this scene in the book which is my sort of homage to Raymond Chandler, and
Sure.
and Harry succumbs to the drug also in a very
Mhm.
interesting scene, and also figures out how to get around it, but he becomes briefly one of the victims as well, and that's a kind of
Mhm.
interesting moment in the book, because it was a big moment with Chandler in two of his books that happens with Marlowe, so I did use that. Yeah.
There's
Um,
also, as you talk, the issue of immigration. Immigration isn't something new, and there's a chapter that the Act Three you start with "Habla español." As I talk Spanish, as you know, I like it. I enjoy the all the comprehension you have about the Mexican and Hispanic community, but they don't like at all cops, and this links with maybe the defunding process that is going or is happening now in some cities. In Toronto is not defunding, is they are increasing the funding. How do you see the relations between, as you said, it's one of the motives that you included, police corruption between police and ethnical minorities? Is it any way that it can improve, or is it damaging these communities?
well, I think it can improve by
Yeah.
taking heed of some of the recommendations that came out of Black Lives Matter. I mean,
Sure.
really, a major one is that instead of
Yeah.
responding with armed cops who are going to shoot people to things
Hmm.
like domestic scuffles, you respond with, therapy and sociologists, and you start to deal with some of these, and you start to deal with some of the underlying issues, which, of course, in this society often don't get dealt with.
Hmm.
Instead, violence is used, um, and I did want to say something about that, which
Yeah.
I just lost my train of thought, but yeah. So, um, I do think, yeah, there's also there's a lot of questioning of like, what was that rebellion, the Zoot Suit
Yeah.
rebellion, what happened in the wake of it, and
Mhm.
that's a big subject of the book, because and how dangerous are these gangs? Are they really gangs at this point, or are they
Mhm.
street kids who are being formed into gangs in order to try to protect themselves from the
Mm.
police really after them? Oh, this is what I wanted to say. I borrowed this from Mike Davis, who just died recently, who's a
Yeah.
wonderful sociologist whose great book is City of Quartz, about LA. But Mike Davis calls the force in LA the space police, and that's what they are. The goal of the force, their purpose is to make sure that everyone stays in their space, and
Mm-hmm.
that no one comes out of it, and that so you have consequently still a very segregated city in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
And
complete.
their goal is often to police that city,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that no one escapes, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that's coherent with your usual train of thought, and we happen now to like and to love even Harry Palmer, and you have the trilogy. What is going to happen in the future? Is there going to be a fourth book, or are you going to change your detective? Do you have something for the foreseeable future?
Yes, I'm starting the second trilogy right
Oh.
away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a second trilogy, and it starts with the crucial issue in Los Angeles right now, and I am influenced by reading and what goes on there,
Mm-hmm.
which is housing and real
Yeah,
estate. And the price of housing, the cost of housing, which is of course a crucial issue all over the United States,
of course.
where housing is becoming much less affordable everywhere. And I was in Vienna last week, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Vienna has a lot of public housing, and great
Mm-hmm.
public housing, also very cheap, but they're starting to build condos now, and they're using that
Oh
as the
my.
way to
Yeah.
raise to raise rents, so that a very
Mm-hmm.
livable city moves toward becoming an unlivable city. But in LA, of course, the next one is called The House That Buff Built.
Mm-hmm.
And it follows Harry into the 50s, where things harden and the seamy corruption continues to ooze. This one is
Mm-hmm.
about housing and real estate in LA, because in 1952 events occur. One is Article 34 is inserted into the California Constitution, which says
Mm-hmm.
that no neighborhood that each neighborhood can reject public housing, and that's why there's not much public housing in LA, because the neighborhoods reject it. And also, there's another thing called the blight law, which says that if your neighborhood is considered a blight, or where you live is considered a blight on the neighborhood, it can be bulldozed, and was, you know. And so there's a lot of there's also talk about reparations. Last July, a beachfront property was returned to this black family, and they sold it back to the city for 20 million, but it
Mm-hmm.
was just stolen from them in the 20s. So there's lots of things here. Harry will lose his place, because Bunker Hill's being bulldozed, the place where
Mm-hmm.
he lives, the
Yeah.
place of intransigence
Oh
and,
my.
kind of low lives. So getting rid of that. So he's going to lose his place, and also there'll be a bigger role for Crystal.
Mm-hmm.
Crystal's been very
Oh.
important in this series, and she's a very funny sort of working class woman who's kind of coming into her own here, and she's going to pose as a real estate agent actually in the book. So and it's called The House That Buff Built because it also deals with the Los Angeles Times, which, as I said
Mm-hmm.
today, tends to run groundbreaking investigative stories, but in the 40s and 50s really
Yeah.
was horror. So it's called The House That Buff Built because the wife of the Times owner, Buffy Chandler, was actively involved in this land grab. So
Mm-hmm.
yes. And then there's two more. Beyond that, there's two entries. The next one is called The Dark Ages, as Harry returns to the movie industry in its worst hour at the
Mm-hmm.
height of the McCarthy blacklist, trying to get the money for a writer who is fronting using someone else's name.
Mm-hmm.
And the final entry in this new trilogy is called Pornocopia, about the moment
Oh.
when the porn industry is being taken out of the hands of the mob and put into the hands of corporate investors. So
Yeah. So
that's what,
which one is better?
yeah. Well, yeah. And is there a difference? So, yeah.
Yeah, 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 of course. And you've been producing, you've been writing books one per year. Are you going to follow this rhythm? Are you going to write even faster? Because, well, once we read one book, and as you have the program for the next books, we want to read the next.
Well, I'm trying to get on a schedule of approximately one a year, because I was able to
Yeah.
produce this one last year. I also
Hmm.
do a lot of writing on film and television, and I'm
I
giving a
know.
talk. in an Indian at an Indian university on Monday on
Oh my,
aesthetics
you're around the world. Yeah.
and methodology. Yeah, and I'm also working on two papers. One is a thing on a sort of look at streaming and where it is now and what happened in 2022. It's called the one where everything almost collapsed.
Yeah.
So that's for a cinema magazine called Jump Cut, and then
Oh yeah.
possibly for a magazine called another cinema magazine called Framework. I'm working on an article on apocalyptic TV and climate change and how those two interact, and
Mm,
sometimes in sort
yeah.
of surprising ways. So those
Sure.
are things so that's the coming year. That's
Oh,
enough.
sure, sure. And we follow you also your comments about films and series that at least are weekly. So thank you, Dennis. Thank you for writing. Thank you for sharing your writing and for, well, I think the precinct with the golden arm, which is the third one in the series. Right above me, we are sharing now the page in Amazon where you have it on Kindle, on or paperback, and we're waiting. We're waiting for the next series and for your next papers, of course, your reflections. Let's
Yes,
hope.
it's,
Let's
just to say
hope.
it's also available on Nook and Kobo and
Yeah.
Apple if you don't want to order on Amazon.
Oh,
Yeah,
great, great,
and
great.
will soon be available to be ordered in bookstores. Actually, yeah,
Perfect, perfect.
yep.
So let's hope. Let's hope there comes a day where police have more honest people than dishonest people. We'll find it. We'll find it, and
Yeah.
with the big pharma too. But I'm not talking much because otherwise maybe they cut our interview. Dennis, thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, we'll see you. We'll see each other, or by internet, or any other film festival, or we'll follow each other. Thank you,
Great.
and see you next time. Bye.
Okay. Thanks so much, Antonio. Really appreciate it, and good luck with your media company and everything else.
Thank you.